Hello, I am Dr. Bob. I am going to show you how to set up and operate the Yuasa Motor Drive Unit DR11MR. Throughout this video, I will call it the DR. I will also show you the DR driving a CS-M flexing test jig. The holding plates of the CS-M are medium size, larger than the standard CS holding plates. The custom-made CS-M that I will show has even larger holding plates. The DR does not have any accessories except for the AC power cord and a 3-prong to 2-prong adapter for use when needed. The DR operates only in rotary reciprocating modes. This is the rotary drive shaft. This is the joint bracket that is used to hold the CS in place with the motor drive unit. And you use a coupling to attach the CS to the rotary drive shaft. With other jigs, you might need to install a rotary output shaft flange directly onto the rotary shaft. You may need to add a joint bracket to attach the jig to the motor drive. The joint bracket fastens to the bottom of the motor unit and to the jig. Here's a comparison of the DR11MR and the DML-HP. The DR is wider and heavier than the HP, 20 kilograms versus 15 kilograms. The DR is more powerful than the HP, 6.5 Newton-meters torque versus 1.8 Newton-meters torque. The DR has much greater angular range than the HP, plus and minus 3,600 degrees versus plus and minus 270 degrees. Now we will plug in the motor drive unit and turn on the power switch. Let's take a look at the operation of the rotary shaft. I have placed some painter's tape on the shaft. The tape will point up when the rotary shaft is at 0 degrees. The DR has a range from minus 3,600 degrees to plus 3,600 degrees. The touch panel, which we will view in a moment, has 3 jog buttons used to set the position, a minus button, a plus button, and a 0 button. If you hold the minus button, the rotary shaft will move as far counterclockwise as it can. If you hold the plus button, the rotary shaft will move as far clockwise as it can. With the touch panel, you will be able to set those angles. The maximum counterclockwise position will be called minus SP, and the maximum clockwise position will be called plus SP. I have set minus SP to minus 180 degrees and plus SP to plus 180 degrees. If you hold the 0 button, the rotary shaft will move to the position exactly halfway between the minus SP position and the plus SP position, which will be 0 degrees in this case. You don't have to go to the very ends. You can tap the buttons or hold them for a short time. The motor continues to run while you have the button pressed until it reaches the end. The jog function has 2 speeds, high and low. You select the speed with the touch panel. We have been using the high speed. Let me show you the low speed. I am holding the minus button. It is moving very slowly. I will return it to 0. Again, it is very slow. Suppose I set the minus SP position to be minus 30 degrees and the plus SP position to be plus 90 degrees. Then when I hold the minus button, the rotary shaft moves to minus 30 degrees. When I hold the plus button, the rotary shaft moves to the plus 90 degrees position. And when I hold the 0 button, the rotary shaft moves to the position halfway between minus 30 degrees and plus 90 degrees, which is plus 30 degrees. Let's take a look at the touch panel on top of the motor drive unit. This is the touch panel. Note also the large red emergency stop switch. Let's press the emergency stop switch with the motor running. The motor is running. Now press the emergency stop switch. Immediately the motor unit will stop if it is running, and we get a red warning on the touch panel. The touch panel shows that the emergency stop button was pressed. Take care of whatever the issue was when you applied the emergency stop. Then to reset, rotate the emergency stop switch clockwise to release it. Press the home button. Now we are back where we started. The operation panel can be rotated to be face up when you are using the DR from the other side. Turn off the motor. Remove the 4 screws using a 4mm hex wrench. Lift the panel and rotate it, taking care with the wires going to the panel. Replace the 4 screws. Turn on the motor. Let it boot. Now the panel is facing the other direction. Let's take a closer look at the touch panel and the controls we will use in the setup. The Home button always returns us to this page. The Maintenance button shows I/O settings. There is another page that is accessible with these arrows. The Message button shows any messages. We saw a message when we pressed the Emergency button. Any other pages are accessible with these arrows. The Parameter button allows us to make settings changes. Most of the settings require that we enter a password. The default password is 123456. Touching a button that requires the password will bring up the password window. Entering the code will allow us to make changes. There is a second parameter page if you touch the parameter button again. A third touch brings us back to the first parameter page. Touch the Home button to go back to the home page. At the top left of the touch panel are the target and count indicators. SP is the target count. Touch it to change the target. PV is the current count, and total is the total count since the last reset. Touch and hold the reset buttons to reset the counts. You have to hold the reset buttons for about 5 seconds. Note that the DR will not run if the target SP is lower than the PV, the current count. If you set SP to 0, PV will be unlimited. The position buttons allow us to set the maximum operating counterclockwise position using the -SP button and the maximum operating clockwise position using the +SP button. PV shows the present position of the rotary shaft in degrees. On the parameter page, you can set the maximum positions allowed for different jigs. The SP buttons allow you to set positions to those maximums. The maximum -SP of the DR is -3,600 degrees, 10 full revolutions. The maximum plus of the SP of the DR is +3,600 degrees. As I have already said, there are 3 jog buttons. Minus allows us to move counterclockwise, plus allows us to move clockwise, 0 allows us to move to the middle point of the maximum counterclockwise and maximum clockwise positions. In each case, you must continue to hold the button to move the rotary shaft. Speed is the desired running speed. With the DMLHP and DMLHB, you set the reciprocations per minute speed. With the DR11MR, you set the desired degrees per second. The maximum speed for the jig can be set on the parameter page. The maximum speed of the DR is 1,200 degrees per second. Below the speed indicator, you can see the calculated cycles per minute that result from the chosen speed and the chosen +SP and -SP values. For example, with a speed of 360 degrees per second and -SP of -90 degrees and +SP of +90 degrees, you will have 30 cycles per minute. If we change -SP to be 0 degrees, the cycles per minute will go up to 60 cycles per minute. If we then set speed to be 180 degrees per second, the cycles will go back to the original value of 30. PV shows the current speed in cycles per minute. Because we are not running, the current speed is 0. The positioning button allows us to set a specific angular position of the rotary shaft. Set the desired position, then touch and hold Go to move to that position. For example, I will set it to 30 degrees. When I touch and hold the Go button, the motor will move to the 30-degree position. Start-stop will start a touch panel test. You will need to touch Start to confirm. Touch Start-stop again to stop the test. Let's go to the first parameter page. You can set the jog speed. The default values are 5 degrees per second for low and 10 degrees per second for high. The jog speed can be set as high as 10 degrees per second in low and 360 degrees per second in high. I will change the high speed to be 36 degrees per second. I will need to enter the password. Stop position sets the position the rotary shaft will move to when you stop a test. Minus is the minus SP position. Plus is the plus SP position. 0 is halfway between the minus SP position and the plus SP position. A CC/DEC sets the profile for acceleration and deceleration of the motor. When set for triangle, the speed gradually increases from the minus SP position until it reaches the 0 position, and then gradually decreases until it reaches the plus SP position. I will run a test to show you the behavior. I will run 10 revolutions to the right and then 10 revolutions to the left in the triangle mode. I will run at the highest speed of 1,200 degrees per second and set the minus SP to be minus 3,600 degrees and the plus SP to be 3,600 degrees. I will need to reset the current count, PV, and set the target SP to 1. The motor gradually picks up speed, then gradually slows. It reverses course, gradually picking up speed, and then gradually slowing to a stop. Let's look at that again in the trapezoid mode. When set for trapezoid, the speed increases rapidly from the minus SP position until it reaches its maximum speed. It maintains that speed until it needs to stop at the plus position. I will leave the speed and SP settings the same. I will need to reset the count, PV. Now the motor moves rapidly to one end, stops suddenly, then rapidly reverses direction, then rapidly stops. Triangle has smoother motion through the cycle. Trapezoid causes the cycle to run more rapidly. We normally use triangle for most jigs and trapezoid for multiple turns when twisting. Motion type sets the motor to go back and forth in the reciprocation mode or to run only one direction in the rotation mode. In the rotation mode, the motor will continue to run in one direction only until you press stop or until the number of full rotations reaches the target SP. I will make the motor run 30 rotations in the clockwise direction. I reset the count, PV. I set the speed to plus 1,200 degrees per second. Rotation is clockwise if the speed on the home page is set to a positive value. The motor runs 30 clockwise rotations and then stops. Rotation is counterclockwise if the speed is set to a negative value. And now 30 rotations to the left. I reset the count, PV, and I set the speed to minus 1,200 degrees per second. The motor runs 30 counterclockwise rotations and then stops. Now I will change the operation mode from normal to pitch, but first I must change the motion back to reciprocation. The moment I touch the button, I get a warning that I need to remove the jig. I take care of the warning by holding Return to Origin for a few seconds. If the operation mode is changed from normal to pitch, the motor will move the number of degrees from minus SP to plus SP in the number of steps equal to pitch plus 1. I will set pitch to 3. That will mean 4 steps. I set minus SP to 0 degrees. I set plus SP to 360 degrees. Next in the position window shows 90.0 degrees per step. The total range is 360 degrees. The number of steps is 4, so that is 90 degrees per step. Touch Start and confirm and the motor will move one step of 90 degrees. Do that again and the motor will move another step of 90 degrees. You will need to start 2 more times to reach 360 degrees and then 4 more times to get back to 0 degrees. The DR can be run under software control and make resistance measurements, for example. You could use the pitch mode to make multiple measurements per cycle. On the second parameter page, you can change the password. As I said, the default password is 123456. You may wish to change it to a personal password. You can set the maximum allowed minus SP position, maximum plus SP position, and maximum speed limit. You should set these for the jig you are planning to use. This is to ensure that you never allow a jig to be driven beyond its maximum allowed values. For example, with the CS, the maximum allowed minus SP is 0 degrees. The maximum allowed plus SP is plus 90 degrees. The speed limit for the standard CS is 360 degrees per second. The speed limit for the CS-M with the custom size holding plates that I am demonstrating is 180 degrees per second. I want to stress the importance of these points. If you allow the CS to be moved into negative degrees, the holding plates will crash into the jig base plate. If you allow the CS to be moved beyond plus 90 degrees, the holding plates will crash into each other. If you allow the CS to be moved more rapidly than its speed limit, you can damage the holding plates and the jig. This protects you from accidentally setting unallowed positions with the minus SP button and plus SP button and speed button on the home page. You can disable the brake with this button. Releasing the brake allows manual movement of the jig. Once you release the brake, it will go back into the default of invalid the next time you operate the motor. Let me illustrate this. I will release the brake. Now I will go back and forth between the parameter pages and the home page. The brake is still released. But if I operate the motor, even by just tapping a jog button, the brake release is canceled. On this parameter page, you can change the display language and the date. The DMLHP and DMLHB have a settings page that allows you to set the IP address of the motor unit. The DR11MR uses the fixed setting of 192.168.10.1, and that cannot be changed. As I said earlier, with the DMLHP and the DMLHB, you set the cycles per minute. With the DR, the setup is different. You set the degrees per second. When setting up a test with the DMLHP or DMLHB, you normally specify the number of cycles per minute, the total angle of rotation, and the number of cycles. You calculate the test time by multiplying the number of cycles per minute and the total number of cycles. With the DR, you will specify the number of degrees per second, the total angle of rotation, and the number of cycles. Normally, you will want to know how many cycles per minute you will be running and what the test time will be. These tables can help you with that. First, select the table, triangle mode or trapezoid mode. Go across the top of the table to reach your desired number of cycles per minute. Go down the table to the row that is the total angular rotation you will be using. The cell at the intersection is the degrees per second you will need to set on your DR. These values may not be exact, but they will be close enough to set up your test. I have attached the CS-M to the DR. These holding plates are larger than the normal CS-M holding plates. These were custom made. The CS-M is much larger than the CS. Let me show you the size difference. This is a standard CS. The CS-M holding plates are much larger than the CS holding plates. This allows much larger samples to be tested. Here are the standard CS holding plates. To run a test, press Start-Stop. You will be given a confirmation button to actually start. Tap the Start button. Now the machine is running. I set the speed to 120 degrees per second and the mode to triangle. That means 20 cycles per minute. I set the target to 10, so the time of the test will be 30 seconds. The machine will stop when it reaches the target number. The test machine stops. This concludes the Yuasa DR11MR setup and operation video.